Thanks, Fraser. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to spend a little bit of time this afternoon talking about what omnichannel food retailing really means and how supermarkets in the UK in particular, I think, can offer some useful insights and lessons in terms of how to do this well. I'll talk largely about supermarkets for a couple of reasons. The first is it's what I know. My thunder was stolen by Fraser, but I've spent 15 years of my career in the supermarket sector, and 7 of those working specifically in online delivery functions. But the second reason, I think, more importantly, is that supermarkets probably do genuinely represent the leading thinkers in omnichannel thinking. Some of the other speakers will probably disagree, actually. But particularly for food and drink businesses, obviously, and especially those supermarket brands that are based in the UK, which has really become the market leader for the home delivery model. Supermarkets have had 15 years now to really develop and understand the concepts behind offering a multi-channel food service. And today, those services are relatively mature and incredibly diverse. And of course, those supermarket brands that haven't matured in that space in the same way as others probably struggle, without exception, for market share to a variable extent. I'll start by doing some of the misconception stuff, though, first. Being omnichannel isn't having a website. It's not offering click and collect. It's not having a Facebook page or an Instagram account. It's not even having chat capabilities or a messaging service through tools like WhatsApp. And it's not Apple Pay. None of these things have a future tense to them. None of these things are going to happen. All of those things have happened already. And if you really are doing all of these things right now, then you're probably at best a multi-channel business. If you're not doing all of these things already, of course, then the chances are you're probably already behind. And you certainly will be very soon. This, for example, is what I would call a multi-channel product offer. So it's a great chat functionality that allows a customer to inquire about a product. Great, so far so good. But where it falls down is that it doesn't actually ultimately allow the customer to progress to product selection, payment, and ultimately receiving their product. It's not connected for the consumer. This is probably what I would call now a multi-channel business. So Made.com, everybody probably knows of as a pure play e-tail business. What's interesting is that Made.com have reached a point in their development and growth where when what they sell is fundamentally a tactile product, there is a limit to a number of customers who will go and buy a sofa, table and chairs, whatever it is, without wanting to touch, feel and experience that product first. Becoming multi-channel for Made.com has meant moving from an e-commerce brand into bricks and mortar stores, or showrooms as they call them. The difference, I think, between all of these and delivering something that's truly an omni-channel service for your customers lies in connecting all of those different component parts together seamlessly and effortlessly, allowing your customer to access your product or your brand whenever and however they want to, with the same message all of the time. I think it's a massive opportunity, particularly in the small business world, in that it just doesn't exist at the moment. In the last 10, 20, 30 years, the fabric of society and the types of people we are has shifted rapidly and emphatically. That is largely the responsibility of relentless technological advancement. But as a result, there are huge changes in the expectations of the consumers that you're trying to serve today. I'll summarize those new customers in terms of 2 very broad new groups. The first of these are digital immigrants. So these people were born before Google and Facebook. They were born in the early or mid-1980s. I think in our mind's eye, these people seem very young, but they're in their 30s now. These people are having babies and buying houses and buying cars. They've become the dominant force in consumerism. What's interesting for us as retailers is how these people view technology and how they interact with it to live and to shop. Digital immigrants were here before digitization really impacted our lives in the way in which it does today. But having said that, they've grown up alongside such vast changes in the landscape of connectivity that they've had to learn to adapt and assimilate new products, new technologies, and new things into their lives. As a result, they're really comfortable using new devices and new things, and they appreciate the value add of good, helpful innovation. So far, so good. The second group are the digital natives, the after-Googlers. These guys have a completely different relationship to the world. They've only ever known this world to be so connected, so digital, so global, and so instant. They're the key demographic, I think, for so many brands. And again, they seem very young to us. But if you were born in 1997, the same year that Google was, you're 19 now. And in the next few years, you'll become the main purchasing force in the world. Digital natives aren't delighted by innovation. They just expect it. And the pace at which something changes for a digital native from being an innovation and new into something that's just expected as part of your service is frightening. To a digital native, for example, the internet doesn't exist anymore. That might be an odd thing to say, but if you speak to an 18, 19, or 20-year-old today, they don't use words like internet or website. It's just not in their vocabulary. There are no active verbs for going online or surfing the web because it just is. Digital natives are permanently connected. So when we spend some time today thinking about what's the future of food and drink retailing and who are our customers, it's really these two key groups that we need to think about, focus on, and cater for. They genuinely do control all of your tomorrows. So what is it that makes them different? They actually fundamentally have disrupted the way in which we've traditionally retailed for generations. I'll use a very small example by way of the checkout space at a supermarket. The checkout space at a supermarket used to be a really helpful space for this. Impulse sales of things that you didn't want, but you didn't need, but you kind of really wanted. Sweets, chocolates, fizzy drinks, and the like. Why was it such a great space? Because supermarkets had a captive audience. There was that horrible period of at least 5 minutes where, as a customer, you were forced to stand there and wait. Brands could dangle things in front of us that were appetizing, even if they were a little bit naughty, and we'd pick them up. Today, that model just doesn't work. Number one, we're probably not stood in front of a checkout anymore anyway. But if we do stand in front of a checkout now, what's the very first thing you do? Take out your mobile phone to do anything on. Everybody today is permanently connected. You see it in the pre-event phase of events like this, actually, when everyone comes in and immediately emails, checks the news, does anything except talk to another human being. That 5 minutes is an opportunity now to interact with the world. And correspondingly, the impulse opportunities for brands to sell to us is gone. This is probably my favorite example of that in action. This is a city in China where they now have 2 pedestrian lanes. There's one for walking along whilst being on your mobile phone and one for not. That's how quickly innovation is taking over our lives. We build cities for this now already. So what else do we know about digital immigrants and digital natives? Well, the value of immediacy with this group, or these two groups, is a lot stronger than it was before. A generation ago, when we wanted products and services, we went to get them. We went to our out-of-town supermarket to buy our groceries. We went to a McDonald's to order a burger or pick up our pizza from Domino's. We understood that we were a very small part of a very big world, and brands and food retailers kind of just stood on the sidelines shouting at us, and we went to them and stood in queues like this. Today's customer is completely different. Today's customer doesn't look at the world and try and figure out, where do I fit in with it? Today's customer looks at where they are and demands that the world comes to them. Our mobile phone in particular has genuinely put us at the center of the universe. We're no longer a part of the world, we are the damn world. I think the food business challenge in this area is that meeting an increased demand for immediacy inevitably means offering some kind of delivery service for your product. It's actually almost kind of the challenge of yesterday. The demand for an immediate, near real-time access to your product or your brand isn't going to decrease. In fact, the opposite is true. Innovation just keeps on coming and stepping up more and more different ways of satisfying the customer's need for speed. Probably all seen Uber, nothing new, moving out of their traditional heartland as a taxi service and into the takeaway delivery model. Uber Eats, now you may have seen, is offering to deliver some items in some cities within 10 minutes. You might have also seen this. This is probably my personal favorite. This is the Domino's pizza slice button. Basically, it lives on your fridge and it knows your favorite pizza. So whenever you are hungry, no need for boring things like websites and payment details. You just whack the button and 25 minutes later, your favorite pizza turns up. I want one of those for Christmas if anyone's shopping for a present for me. So what does all this mean for guys like you, accelerating food and drink businesses of tomorrow? Well, I guess at a technical level, it does mean that you have to set up supply chains today to deal with a very different, dynamic, real-time, ever-changing customer and product supply chain. That is a technical challenge, to be sure, but I also think it's another opportunity for smaller businesses. At least you don't have the burden that companies that are larger, more established, and have been around a long time have, of trying to start unpicking and replacing burdensome processes and systems that have been around a long time and no longer fit. Massive opportunity for smaller, leaner businesses that don't have that problem, I think. The takeaway, if there's no pun intended, is that on-demand food and delivery is now a thing. There's no point in pretending that it's not. It used to be very limited to takeaway businesses, but in the coming weeks, months, and years, it will affect convenient shopping, FMCG goods, and core restaurant businesses more and more. As I mentioned before, the speed at which something changes from being a delighter and something that's just extra into something that we have all of the time is quite frightening. I always think the example of Wi-Fi and how we view Wi-Fi when we're on holiday is a good correlative example. So 20 years ago, when you went on holiday, you didn't even know what Wi-Fi was. 10 years ago, when you went on holiday, if there was some free Wi-Fi in the hotel reception area while you were there, then fantastic, great, that was a bonus. 5 years ago, you kind of expected there to be Wi-Fi throughout the hotel and for it to be free. And today, when you go on holiday, who even thinks about whether there's Wi-Fi? That's just a given. The only question is whether you have it at the airport and at the train station on your way to the hotel. I spent some time recently with the chairman of the board of a pretty rapidly growing restaurant chain, probably one of the fastest in the UK. And in that conversation, one of the things that he said was, oh, we'll never offer a delivery service. We're just not prepared to give away 25% of our margin. My kind of response to that is it sort of isn't your choice. To use the Wi-Fi example again, offering a delivery service for a restaurant brand has probably already moved so far away from being a delighter, it's pretty much something that you must have or you risk losing a sale because too many people are happy to do it for you. There's no point in pretending that it doesn't exist. And by the way, it might be a little bit of an aside, but probably an important one for those of us in the room who might have this very challenge. I'm convinced, by the way, that that guy's logic is wrong. As I've spent years trying to work through for supermarket businesses in the past, there are hundreds of different ways of trying to solve the cost of service versus needing to offer a delivery service model. I think what's very interesting about the food and drink world at the moment is that the challenge and the problems of the future are not whether you offer a delivery service, that's a given. The challenge of the future is how you deal with the other things that you have to offer as a result of offering those kinds of services. Another supermarket example here. All of the big 4 supermarkets already offer an online delivery service. What their experience of the last 5 or 10 years can help smaller businesses think about for the future is that the main reason why customers now switch their shopping provider online for supermarkets is the service proposition. And that tells us that that will be our challenge of the future. Inevitably, the service proposition for most of us means how a delivery driver interacts with your customer on the doorstep. Delivering to your customer outside of your traditional restaurant, store, pop-up, food van, whatever it is, doesn't mean that you don't still have to offer a fantastic service to customers. One of the biggest and most underestimated challenges in food retail at the moment, I think, is the reputational risk that brands seem willing to take by putting increasingly the only interaction with your customer face-to-face into the hands of somebody who generally you have no control over. This is what we're used to seeing in a store. This is somebody who, comparatively, you have near total brand control over. We can make sure this person comes to work wearing the right uniform or dressed appropriately for your brand. We can even watch them all day long if we want to and make sure that the way in which they interact with your customer is exactly the way that you would want them to. We can check that they're smiley and friendly. They can answer any questions the customer has. Conversely, this is very often what turns up on our doorstep. We actually took this picture outside our offices a couple of weeks ago. And when we asked the driver what was going on here, he very simply just said, well, I work for both companies and I can't be bothered to change my uniform, so I just wear both. How has this not become a problem yet? By the way, the only problem here is one of brand recognition. It could be so much worse. I have professionally had to deal with a driver who took a leak in a customer's front garden immediately before delivering them their food. If you're really interested, further details in the networking session, but it genuinely does happen. I think what's fascinating is that we spend £1.6 billion a year as an industry on customer service initiatives. We spend less than 10% of that amount of money on third-party or external customer service initiatives, despite the fact that it's the fastest growing way in which you serve your customers by a country mile. So what else do we know about digital immigrants and digital natives? Frustratingly and annoyingly, they also don't value stuff like we used to. Post-war consumerism was all generated around things and ownership because it hadn't really happened before. Own a house, own a car, own a baby, whatever it was. Stuff itself was quite a new concept. It was quite a new thing. New devices and technologies kept on coming out. Own a DVD player, own a CD player. I'm told there was something called a Walkman once upon a time. You could own one of those too. Today, and what digital natives have grown up with, stuff is kind of just there. It's omnipresent. It's not a thing. It's not impressive. Instead, one of the impacts of tools like Facebook, Instagram, and so on, Snapchat, they've started to create in us first and foremost, and then expand on a desire for experience. So when you go into work on a Monday morning in beautiful weather like this, and you see some picture like this on your Instagram feed with a wonderful comment from a mate of yours with something like, "And how's your Monday?" Our interest and curiosity to what that friend is doing is mostly geared around thinking about the experience that friend is having. And imagine ourselves having that experience. It's aspirational in some ways. This is a perfect slide for today, isn't it? I'd rather be there. What's interesting about this, I think, is that we've become experience obsessed, and it's a relatively new phenomenon that's growing incredibly quickly. This guy went to the moon not so long ago and took 5 pictures. This girl went to the bathroom last week and posted 37. We have genuinely become experience obsessed. The share economy, which I interpret as the monetary value to your business of creating a moment associated with your product or your brand that is genuine, authentic, and replicable, is the cut-through gold dust of the years ahead. Who didn't take at least one picture of themselves and post it online with a bottle of Coke with your own name on it? There genuinely is a market for you creating a specific and correct connection with your customer that they can understand and relate to. 77% of your consumers say they would buy more of your product if they had a better experience with the product. So what does all this mean for your brands? Well, at a basic level, it does mean that you need to stop selling stuff. To succeed in the future, consumers won't respond anymore to brands shouting louder and louder and buy me. Instead, in order to succeed in the future, you'll need to offer an experience that's associated with your product, something that your customer can comment on, share with their friends, talk about, post online. If you don't believe me and you fancy braving the elements, then go out and have dinner in London tonight. In fact, here's a little list of things that you can genuinely do today after this if you want to. You can go and have a drink in a ball pit bar. Take an activity that was fundamentally built for children, stick some alcohol in it, and go and experience that instead. If that doesn't quite float your boat, then why not pop along to a restaurant and have dinner completely in the dark to simulate the experience of being blind. Actually an experience. Being blind is an experience. And if that still isn't quite right for you, then nip along to the South Bank, hop up into the top of a tree, and have a cocktail in a treehouse bar. All of these things, I swear you can genuinely do tonight. And clearly, all of these things are marketed not for the content of what's in there. It's not about the food. It's about the experience you can have whilst you're having the food or drink that you're there. It's this pretty unique mix of speed, shareability, uniqueness that's largely responsible for the phenomenal rise of concepts like street food, which are a complete contrast to the sit-down formality of restaurants. I'm going to share with you a video in a second of probably my favorite example of a business that's really grabbed hold of this concept and taken it to a new level. But I should probably explain them a little bit first. So the business is Jaffle Shoots, this company here. They're based in Melbourne in Australia. And what you're looking at is their menu. They're a sandwich shop. You've got a choice of 3 sandwiches, so clearly it's not about the food. I'll start playing the video for you and talk it through. A couple of hours before you are due to pick up your sandwich, you get a text telling you what street to go to. And when you arrive, there's an X on the floor to tell you where to stand. Everyone sort of gets around together, there's lots of photos and people not quite sure what happens. And eventually your sandwich is literally parachuted to you out of the sky. Clearly this is not about the sandwich. You'll see in a second when they open it, sorry Jaffle Shoots, the sandwich looks bloody awful. But what this is about is getting together, community. It's very shareable. You can take pictures and post it. People can sit around on the floor and swap sandwiches. And, oh, I got cheese and tomato. Did you get ham and cheese? It taps into something that's unique and is about a bit more than just the food. Ultimately, it makes me feel something. And we almost crave that more than we crave the sandwich. I really think that our barometer for this in the UK, and a good measure of how quickly things have changed, is the Christmas supermarket advert. So this advert that's now playing is an advert for a supermarket from 2009. Now the quality of the video is not fantastic, I'm afraid, but you'll see there's loads in here about price, product, selling. The message behind this advert is basically, I can do your Christmas cheaper than everybody else can. Fast forward just 5 years, and Sainsbury's campaigned Christmas with this. Not unique by any stretch of the imagination, by the way. So you might remember this advert from 2 years ago. It tells the story of the famous football match between the Germans and the British in the First World War. I won't play you the whole thing. This advert runs for 3 minutes and 40 seconds, and there isn't a product or a price in sight. The battle for Christmas for food retailers has completely shifted in just 5 years. It's about winning the moment to win the market. And the more personal and more emotional the connection, the stronger the brand power. Who doesn't look forward to the John Lewis bloody advert every year now? This was quite unique for me. I'm sure some of you got this as well. I got emailed to tell me when the John Lewis advert was coming out this year. That's how powerful the message of that advert is now for that brand. Okay, let's roll it back a little bit. That's all very well for multinational businesses with a TV budget of millions. The difficult bit is it's as important, even if it is harder, for smaller businesses to find the same personal connection with your customers, finding innovative, insightful, and unique ways of connecting with them and giving them something more than just your product. Customers are going to want to answer this question increasingly about your product over and over again. Why are you different? I'll share an example with you now that might be a little bit uncomfortable for some of us in the room. 87% of the brands in the room today have an Our Story section on your website. Now, almost without exception, because I've had a look at some of these, almost without exception, that part of your website is a couple of mugshots of the founders and a few bullet points that are basically a CV of the business. Now, I don't mean to be dismissive to any of you, because some of these are genuinely incredibly interesting. But by definition of the fact that 87% of you are doing it, it's not unique. It doesn't make you individual. You need to do more. The best way to try and create something personal for your customers, I think, is to personalize. And the ready availability of data in today's world can really help you here. So I'm going to try and illustrate a point about data, and I'm going to do it by doing something I've used at events like this before, and without exception, it either works phenomenally well or goes incredibly badly, so I apologize in advance. Is there somebody called Laura Drake in the room? And if so, can you stick your hand up? Ha! That's Laura. By the way, if you can't see her because it's quite a big room, that's Laura. She sat at the back on table 16. That's the whole reason table numbers are here. Now, before the rest of you suddenly get really tense and nervous, there are a lot of people who are suddenly extremely interested in their feet. I promise you I won't pick on anybody else this afternoon. I've also already lied a little bit, because I should say that I did catch Laura just before the event started and check that she was happy with me doing this, so she's not completely cold. Thank you, Laura. I'm going to try and tell you a little bit about Laura that I found out from some research this afternoon. And Laura, feel free to stand up and shout if I get anything wrong, / don't. Here goes. So, Laura's 28 years old. She works for Tesco. She has 2 parents, obviously. Her parents' name are Jeanette and Simon, and she has 1 brother. She also has a boyfriend, isn't that? At least I think she does. Isn't that cute? Laura, have I got anything wrong so far? Fantastic. Okay. Here's now where it might get a little bit more interesting, or at least a bit more relevant. Every Friday night, Laura gets a takeaway. Now, she's not completely predictable. She does change it up. There's been posts of pizza and Chinese and Indian. So I'm really embarrassing you now, aren't I? Sorry. Just hang, you can leave after I've finished, I promise. So she's not completely predictable. She does change it up, but it's pretty much a staple if you go through Instagram feeds and so on, that every Friday night, a takeaway there is. Oh, and she usually posts a picture that looks a bit like this. So we can assume that that's a staple of a Friday night as well. White or red for the networking session, Laura? White, if anybody does want to bring some to her. Okay, so Laura, I won't pick on you anymore, thank you. So the point of all of this is not to tell you to go out now and start stalking your customers before anyone gets me into some trouble. It's really just to try and illustrate how much data is readily and validly available and at your fingertips. Now, again, on the face of it, this is nothing new. I think everybody in the room is very aware that companies like Facebook and Google have made their entire wealth out of selling that data for marketing purposes. What perhaps is a bit more subtle and more interesting to us is that that debate has already moved on. Digital natives and digital immigrants don't care that you have their data. In fact, the opposite is true. They're quite happy for you to have information about them, as long as you use it to offer products and services that are tailored to them. It's back to that point from earlier. I am the center of the world. Bring me things that are useful. So if the problem of data is not having it anymore, and that digital natives and digital immigrants are happy with that, then what are the problems for you guys? Bizarrely, not doing anything with it, I think, is one. Because it's so readily available, and that dynamic in modern parlance is so well understood, you are expected now to have used that data well to bring me things that are individual and unique and tailored to me. So the first pitfall is doing nothing. The second pitfall is this, being sloppy. Anybody else get this on their Facebook feed? Please tell me it's not just me. I did one Google search about what my impending future might look like. And if you've met my dad, you would understand my concern. And now every time I log into Facebook, that's what I get. There are no prizes for being sloppy. Thank you, Facebook, if there's anyone from Facebook in the room. What I would hopefully do is try and leave you with some flavors and indications of which way the world is blowing. And I would urge you, if you're in the room because you are a smaller business that's looking to accelerate and grow, or an established business looking to do something new, then get out there and go and talk to hundreds of people at events like this and find out the best way of navigating all of this stuff. It's changing really quickly, and it's very complex. So to summarize, I guess points from me would be that, number one, peer review, comment, and trust will become a growing and ever-increasing and ever more important part of growing momentum behind your product or your offer. Secondly, you need to be available for customers whenever, however they want you to be. And that does mean click and collect, delivery services, chat functionality, etc., all at once, all connected, and unfortunately not picking and choosing in order to offer a truly omni-channel service that's accessible to all of your customers. Thirdly, personalization, authenticity, and communication will become the new battlegrounds for customers in the future. And fourthly and finally, big data is out there. You are now expected to have it and to use it well. I'd end by saying that I think there's something really interesting about the world of food and drink retailing at the moment, and you guys do all the hard work. For probably the first time in a generation, the stars have almost aligned back in favor of the small business model. It's easier to operate, and there's an absolute market for people like you. And I think the future of food and drink retailing, whatever happens out of the event today and the other speakers share, is absolutely about the value we can pull together in the networking session and beyond for food and drink retailers like you guys. Thanks very much.